skillfully fill out that form with somebody who's done it before, or else they'll deny it. That's kind of their gig. That's how they make their money. Anyway, not everything's a rip-off, but that type of stuff a lot of times is. So we're going to keep talking about tax strategies. So this is kind of a continuation from last week, but literally there's so much involved in taxes, and it's kind of overwhelming. But again, my suggestion to you is early, maybe the next year you can even use the old TurboTax. The tax system is not going to change that much over the years. But if you're looking at doing a big purchase, if you're looking to do something and you're motivated, it's a good investment in terms of taxes or whatever, run the numbers for your individual situation. Like I said, you probably won't have a situation for a while unless, I don't know, maybe some folks are, doing quite well out there, but there's a lot of things that, that's tax deductible. But when you get to a certain income level, and I'm not saying I'm necessarily there, but even some of the easy stuff I no longer get. Child deductions, college, no, big zero. You're not eligible. Medical stuff, keep all your receipts. Unless they're going to be 7.5%, of your income, your AGI, your adjusted gross income, save yourself some time and some hassle. Now, you probably still want to save them. Anyway, just don't be shocked at the end of the year when you go, wow, I had, $1,000 worth of medical expenses. In the big scheme, if you're making $50,000, you needed what, $3,250 or something like that. Some more money before it even becomes deductible. But there's other things, like perhaps some solar stuff, and you got to be careful too before you buy it. But if it's covered in a program, that's useful. Now, also, there's things up here in Alaska where if you're already reimbursed through some government program, you don't necessarily get paid again. If you do own a home, I believe it's still out there. I did it just a year or two ago, and real estate people definitely encourage people to do it, but it's Alaska Home Energy kind of rebate thing. They come out and they measure your home and give it certain quantities. Anyway, the good news is you basically can get a new heating system for little to no cost. Something that's super, super efficient. So it's, again, most of the things in the tax code or incentives like that are for some sort of, societal good. I had an old furnace in the home that was like I guess it was a oil furnace way back when, before I bought the house and been converted, not very efficient. Anyway, so my power bills went down to, probably a quarter of what they were, and the new thing is completely automated, and, anyway, so I'm not spewing so much stuff in the air, and I'm not paying so much, and, it's a one-time good deal when you're a homeowner. But anyway, because of that, it was about $7,000 worth of furnace. But I can't put anything on my taxes about that because I've already been reimbursed. So, and by all means, I'm not telling you to cheat or evade taxes, but avoid these. That's why the tax code is there. They're trying to, coerce you into behaving a certain way, and if you cooperate, then you legitimately get to pay a lower tax rate, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. The thing is, too, that most people are actually too cautious with their taxes. They'll not claim everything that's available because they're scared. They don't want to get in trouble with the IRS. They'd rather pay just a little bit extra to think they buy themselves some sort of protection. Probably not happening. So, and I have, in a number of times, had my taxes done professionally, by an independent person when I had a really screwed up thing, and literally $300 or $400 to kind of have the peace of mind, and they may actually recover that money, by finding some tax thing, and their services are tax deductible, because it's a tax preparation fee. Now again, I'll show you at the little while through here some marginal tax rates and things like that. And so if you know that, $400 worth of tax deductible is really only saving me, about $100 out of pocket depending on the tax. So anyway, Specific implications of spending on taxes owed. How you earn and spend money will have great effect. So anyway, some of these tax deferred things, again, tax deferred, you're just postponing taxes, but you're postponing them hopefully till the time in your life when you're in a lower tax rate. So 401k, 403b, thrift savings plan is the military variant of that. Traditional IRA, and then a Roth. On a Roth IRA, again, you may not know all these terms now, it's no big deal, but once you do start saving, traditional versus a Roth they have different features. So Roth, you go ahead and pay the taxes now on that as income, but when you get into retirement, all that amassed money, which is hopefully, time value money, is amassed to a large amount, that money is all tax free. So there's a lot of advantages to having a Roth, but you may want to have both. Home mortgage interest tax deduction. So we talked about that. There's having a home is, for me, it's kind of a necessity. I at least will have dogs, probably horses, something like that. So yeah, that's not suitable for a renting situation. So quality of life, I've always been in a home, but it is a bit of an anchor. But in terms of financially, a home is probably a better investment. And just like I said last week, even if it's close in terms of your house payment and your rental payment, your house payment, once you're in the mortgage, it's no longer affected by inflation. Whereas that rental payment is going to be affected. And that mortgage interest deduction, home mortgage, you get a better deal as a taxpayer, but that investor who owns the apartment, if you're renting that, he's also getting a investment deduction based upon interest expense. So, any tax credits versus tax deductions, as you know, tax credits are good. They're awesome, one for one. $100 tax credit means that's like $100 in your pocket. You got to wait till April to get it, but that money is coming to you in total. Tax deduction, not so fast. You're going to get whatever your rate is on that. Like, let's just say 25%. So, you give away a $400 item, you get, $100 less tax you got to pay. So not bad, but obviously a credit is something else. Importance of taxes. I'm not going to get political here. I know, especially in an election year, I'm probably, a fair number of Bernie Sanders guys out there, and I'm not really driven to one certain candidate, but it might not be him. But anyway, the deal with just the other side of sort of the Bernie thing is that Margaret Thatcher, she was pretty well hated, very conservative though. In retrospect, I think she was all right. But her famous saying was socialism is great until you run out of other people's money, and that kind of is what happens. You can get enough in taxes, you have to continue to. But anyway, different theories. Not going there. But when somebody says something is free, there's nothing that's free. So importance of taxes. Yep, vital. Understanding the taxes. Another thing. The guy's very conservative, but tax-wise he's fairly neutral. But he doesn't have a dog in the fight. He's the old Secretary of Defense, Rumsfeld, but he's a fairly principled guy. And what he does every year with his taxes is he has this form letter note thing that says, because you sign on your taxes that you've completed them correctly. And he always includes this letter that says, I've tried to the best of my ability. But given the complexity, the 3,000, because there's no way, and that's kind of my defense if I get audited. I did the best I could, you know what I mean? And that's the thing. If it did come to an audit, I haven't been in an audit, but if it looks like you're trying to evade taxes, they're going to hammer it. If it looks like the thing is so confusing, you tried to do the right thing and a mistake was made, pay out. And it's going to be a whole different thing. There's not going to be any probably penalties involved. But again, that's just my guess. But obviously the auditors know the system is out there and it's a little complex. So I think I beat this to death about doing the trial run. And again, lots of different companies out there. Other companies may emerge, but if you pick one and you kind of stick with it, it's just that bonus of being able to log in each year and have all those numbers and addresses and social security numbers and all that stuff sort of pre-filed. And then also being able to go back and look at old tax returns. So do some research, figure out what company you're going to go with, if you're going to do it that way, and stick with it. And like I say, you know, even when I've hired somebody to do my taxes, I've done them independently myself, and you know, see how close our answers are. And the thing that was unique too, though, was the student who's here, is not here tonight, but when she was talking about professionally doing taxes, I wasn't, you know, being sarcastic or whatever, but I do have friends who are, you know, would be just like you in this class, where they go to some, you know, Jackson Hewitt or H&R Block, you know, you're going to be a tax preparer for us. We're going to put you through a 1-weekend crash course and show you how to do taxes. Having somebody like that do your taxes is probably not as good as you doing it yourself. I'm saying if you're going to pay $300-400, you know, you're going to get somebody who's maybe, well, not CPA quality, but somebody who's pretty sharp, a bookkeeper type thing, a professional, not just kind of a weekend warrior who comes in there and does it for 1 month of the year in tax season. You know, and tell you the truth, right now, if you went to hire a tax person, it's too late. The good ones are gone. You know, you need to think about this earlier in the year, explain some of your situation, start giving them your files. But anyway, so it's like anything else. It's like, you know, you get what you pay for, and there are some folks out there who present themselves as tax professionals that are may have just gone to a weekend course, and you having a personal interest in it are probably going to be able to do a better job in spite of their training, because you can pick it up as you go. So anyway, know the current tax laws the best you can, plan purchases to reduce your liability, and take advantage of tax credit. Why paying your fair share? And you will definitely pay your fair share. You know, you're already paying, you know, you're paying sales tax, you're paying user fees, you're paying a fair amount of taxes before you even start to get taxed. Calculating taxable income. So when you look at, let's say you make $100,000, well, when you go to pay your taxes, there's going to be some adjustments to that, and go figure. They call it adjusted gross income. So there's some numbers that come, you know, net income after deductions on which tax is computed. So it's going to be a lower number. You're, like I said, though, if you're using a 401k or a you know, some tax deferred type thing, the going in number, the 100,000 that you started with, if you know, were good, and you put away a good chunk, say 20%, your going in number is only 80,000, and then it's just going to go down from there. So, again, the goal is to get that AGI as low as possible. You know, not by not earning, but by smartly having deductions and everything else. Earned income, so that's what you think about when we normally talk about it. You know, wages, salary, commissions, fees, tips, bonuses. Does anybody do like a food server or big tip kind of employee? They have different strategies on how they take people. But like certain states like California, they're pretty hard over on it. You know, they'll look at how much your restaurant sales are, and they'll assess you a percentage. And so if you're a crummy server, it's going to be very painful, because you're going to get assessed like you're, you know, say a 10% tip level or something. Yes.
I have a friend too, and he says that lots of people give him tips because he's the busser, and they do the tips go to him. But really, he has to bring it up front, so the waitress or waiter gets the tips instead.
Yeah.
And so people are always tipping the wrong people because they think everybody just gets.
Yeah, that gets the politics inside of, like my daughter, for example. She, I think she lasted 2 nights. Eagle River Ale House. She was going to be a hostess, but she wasn't 21 just then, and so they said she was also a busser, but she didn't even get any chunk of the tips. So I bust dishes. I've had every like job, and I had good waitresses, and we split a chunk of it. But yeah, it's an inaccurate science. But if you're someplace like California where they want every dime, you know, and they have a state income tax, they have it can get really involved. Other things, I mean, other ways to get income, investment income, obviously, so rent, money coming in from investment, passive income. This is stuff, the reason why you'd be involved in passive type things are to minimize your liability. Okay, let's say, for example, I was going to invest with some friends in a condominium, and man, this was right about when everything went south in 2007, 8 or something. But I was just a passive investor. What I could have lost in that investment, I was putting up, I don't know, $10,000 or something. I didn't do it, thankfully, but I could have lost that $10,000. If I would have been a full-up active investor, more involved in the management and not had the passive role, I could have not only lost that 10 grand, but I could have lost a lot of it because they lost more than they had invested. So if you're in a passive role, stay there. You know what I mean? And other times it has to do with liability in terms of other things that go on with the business. But if you ever hear that this is a passive investment for you, you don't want to step out of that category. I worked at a pizza place one time. This is fantastic. We had our own cars and our own pizza, but it was a passive investment for these dentists, so they couldn't all get involved in the management. And so we ran amok. I mean, we had a great time in that business because it was very little oversight, and it was a fun college job. But anyway, that's where I kind of learned about that the first time, and then obviously the business stuff. Other income, if anybody's ever been fortunate enough to win money at the casino or whatever, they will come out there with basically I guess it'd be a 1099-G, gambling winnings. And that is classified as income, and you tax it. So you win $1 million, no, you win somewhat less. And they'll even withhold it before they give you. So it's a big winning, and by all means, the casinos and everybody else is involved in that. Could have alimony. Child support, not so much, but awards, winning prizes, all those things are taxable. Certain things too that are not considered income. If you're in a job that does a lot of per diem, that has a lot of travel associated with it, that can be quite a lucrative type thing as long as your expenses are reasonable, because that's not taxable. That's not viewed as income. So again, I knew guys who were down in the desert. This guy had a horrible child support thing that was almost equal to salary. But by staying deployed, he made all this money, whatever, per diem that compensated. But anyway, you'll see it. And this is not usually something where you get to put it in the different categories. It is put in the categories. Round about this time, you'll get, the mail will start showing up 1099, whatever's, DIV, INTs, Gs, things like that. You'll get W-2s, and those numbers are basically pre-populated. As we were talking about last week, you can change the amount that's withheld, but the withholding is just kind of a game. I mean, the withholding doesn't equate to your taxes. The withholding is just sort of a prepayment on what's going to be your taxes, and it's an estimate. And again, if you underestimate the amount of tax due, then you'll owe the IRS a bunch of money, and you'll get a nasty letter, and you'll have to start making quarterly payments. If you overpay the IRS and you get a big refund at the end of the year, the IRS isn't going to say anything because they're pretty happy. I mean, when people are foolish enough to give them a loan and overpay and do all this, they certainly aren't going to squawk because it's so don't do that. Pay roughly about where you are. So the big category of things that come off the AGI is called exclusions, right? So tax exempt income can be one thing. When we talk more about investments, we'll talk about municipal bonds that may be tax free, and you think, oh, okay, that's great. But the deal is that everything's competitive. So if there's a tax free bond paying 3%, the taxable bond will pay like 5% to make up that difference. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's a better investment because it's tax free. It's just going to change around. And then tax deferred, we talked about that. You're postponing it. You're the concept is, okay, by the time I have to actually pay tax on this, I'm going to be retired, I'll own my own home, I won't have to be doing much, I'll be, maybe drawing off my investments, $50,000 a year, something like that, and at $50,000 a year, my tax rate is going to be much lower than in my key working years. It's a not a gamble, but it's a bit of a risk, especially if taxes were to go way up anytime soon. So the AGI, certain deductions made. So things, traditional IRA or a KEO, they keep adding more terms in here and not really explaining them, but an IRA and a KEO would be for somebody who's typically self-employed. Alimony payments, student loan, if it's deductible, and then the same 401k type things that we talked about before. So, they're also referring to these things as tax shelters. Whatever, it's just a means of bringing your taxes down. Tax deduction is amount subtracted from the AGI to arrive at the taxable income. So, a tax deduction, if you get, say you made $100,000 and you donated something worth $1,000, you would deduct your income by 1,000 down to 99,000, and that's where you'd enter the tax table, and that's why it only really equates to something like 25%. Here's some other things that I already mentioned this before. So that medical and dental expenses, 7.5, and again using the $100,000 example, you would need $7,500 worth of medical and dental expenses. And now maybe you've got a family member that's fairly needy in terms of some of those items. They've got a chronic condition. You would probably be in that category every year. But for most people that are healthy, and most of you, I doubt you're going to get there. Hopefully not. I mean, that would be not a good thing. But the other thing is taxes, mortgage interest, contributions. That's right off the top. And then miscellaneous expenses, 2%. 2% is not that. $4,000 worth of miscellaneous stuff. You can probably come up with that. Whatever. I mean, using my example of haircuts and uniforms required, and just when you think about it, things that are related to work often, there's all kinds of categories, but things that are related to work that you're not reimbursed for are generally tax deductible. So, like I say, especially for you, it'll be relevant when you're out searching for that job and you're traveling or wherever. They may reimburse you for part of it, maybe not all of it. But anyway, that part that's not reimbursed, that is certainly tax deductible. And like, whatever, when I do taxes this year, I didn't have that much stuff damaged, but that's all coming off my taxes. Casualties, thefts, and losses. If you have, say a car wreck and it's not reimbursed, that can also, look at the laws, but generally thefts and things like that are good to go. Don't get crazy. Make sure it's legitimate. If you got photos or documentation, then good to go. But again, do what I'm saying in terms of Google it, see if anybody does it, look for the reference to, some sort of tax guide, and then actually look at the IRS pub. And if after all that, by the time you get to the IRS pub, and if the IRS pub publication looks like it's clearly deductible, then go for it. And it's going to be you versus them in the audit, but number one, you're probably not going to get audited. Number two, if you made good faith effort, well, you're probably right. But even if you're misinterpreted somehow, they're probably going to be fairly lenient with you. Exemptions, so deductions for yourself. Yeah, you can change this up. You can even change the numbers of deductions, but that's good. Cosmic. But anyway, on your W-2 for your withholding, when you actually get into the taxes, you have to be exactly right with your deduction. So You'll be able to deduct yourself and then typically dependents. Calculating taxes. Oh, so now you've come up with this AGI number, adjusted gross income, and then you look at the marginal tax rates. Okay? And so we've kind of already talked about this a little bit. Let me jump a little forward in the slides just to show you a couple things. You know what? That's not in this one. Okay, I'm going to reload a different set of slides here on the break, but we'll come back to that, and I'll show you exactly what's going on with the marginal tax rates, where they're at. Come on, dude. Okay, so person's average tax rate. Okay, so average and marginal are different things. Average would be, let's say I got $100,000 worth of income, and my average tax rate is going to be, I don't know, maybe 21%, something like that. Marginal tax rate was, okay, in the first 10 to say 40,000, I was charged at 10%. It's a progressive tax code. There's not a big a chunk taking if you're low income. And then let's say 40 to 60, that was 20%. And then 60, 80, 25%. And then over 80, 28%. So those are margins. So when somebody says, oh, I'm in the 28% tax bracket, that just means for every additional dollar they make, you make another $1,000, that's going to be charged at 28%. But that your entire income, your average tax rate, is nowhere near that. Your average tax rate would be all of those percentages divided. I'll show you the chart after the break, and it'll make more sense. And then again, large tax refund is just screwed up. They're withheld too much money, and you let them do it, and then you give them free loan. So just don't do it year to year. Now sometimes things change. Sometimes, I found this great tax deduction, or we gave away a bunch of stuff at the end of the year, and so it's going to throw your taxes out of whack. It's only sort of an estimate, but if you're year after year getting a big tax one, you are not getting one over in the government. They are getting one over. Yep. So we talked about tax credits versus tax deduction. Anybody have any problem with that? So I'll show you some math problems on how to do that. But let's say if it's 28% tax bracket, you basically get 1 minus 28%. In this case, it would be 0.72. Multiply that 0.72 times that amount, and it comes up to that. We'll work through a problem. You'll see it in a moment. Other tax credits. So foreign taxes, the taxes, like I've got a German home, and they're deductible. So if you can ever, from an employment standpoint, if you can go overseas, that's a pretty good deal, because the first changes, it used to be about $87,000 was basically tax exempt if you're overseas, your first $80,000 worth of employees. Because it's only fair. I mean, you're not here in the United States enjoying the benefits of the taxes you're paying. You're overseas, probably paying more taxes for other stuff. But anyway, because of that, the IRS will not, there's certain benefits in your next account like that. Retirement savings, there's always changes on that. Adoption expenses, we talked about that. Lifetime learning, you have to read the fine print and find out what's acceptable, what's not. Mortgage interest, if they ever got rid of that, you would see housing prices just drop, because that's a huge incentive to keep people in real estate. I mean, it makes it there's lots of other lifestyle factors that go into buy or rent decisions, but from a financial standpoint, it's pretty clear cut that you are way better off by buying. Energy savings. So here you're just sort of chasing whatever the current program is. They phase in, phase out. You know, if you see something, oh yeah, my buddy just got a huge deal for, you know, some solar installation. That may expire this year, whatever year, and it may actually have to be installed with whatever year. So, again, those programs come and go, and you just kind of watch them. Elderly, disabled. You know, one of the first questions on any tax form is, "Are you blind?" You know, I've never been able to check yes to find out. I mean, you can't pick them bad thing there, but anyway, there are certain perks, not perks, but anyway, compensation that's made if you have, you know, certain conditions. But those are political. They change. They go up and down. We saw in there, you know, when we were doing TurboTax, different ways of filing. So, single, legally separated, married, jointly. I don't want to go too far into that right now because I know the tax stuff gets to be a little dry. There's a few videos I think we're going to look at to not just on tonight's stuff, but on other stuff to just kind of break it up a little bit, and then we'll jump back in to the tax stuff in the next hour. So, well, let's stay on taxes in terms of this video real quick.
As I'm sure everyone knows, and probably ruse, the tax filing deadline is rapidly approaching. With me today to talk about how you can avoid ending up in the IRS's sights and what to do if you do is Scott Estill. He's a former IRS trial attorney and author of Tax This, Standing Up Against the IRS. Scott, welcome.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Scott, I think it's fair to say that nobody relishes the idea of getting into a scrap with the IRS. And so I think for most people, the most important thing is to try to avoid getting into that position in the first place. So what are the sorts of things that will trigger an IRS tax audit? What are the red flags that get the IRS's attention?
Well, you know, first of all, you can't avoid an IRS audit if you file a return just because the IRS does do a lot of random audits. But they also look at specific items that may, you know, like you mentioned, trigger an audit. One of the things that they look at is that information that's reported to the IRS, such as W-2 information, 1099, things like that. If you don't report the exact same amounts that are reported to the IRS, an audit will generate. But they also look at statistics too, so that if you're in a particular business or if you have a rental property and your deductions are considerably higher than what they consider to be the norm for that industry, that will generate an audit as well. But and that's really what the IRS is looking at, and along with any particular projects that they may be working on. The big one right now is offshore income. So anybody with offshore bank accounts has a much higher rate of audit right now.
Well, given that, what can you do to avoid your chances of being audited? Or, barring that, what can you do to make sure that your return will stand up if you are singled out by the IRS?
The first thing you want to do is understand as much as you can about the tax laws, at least those laws that apply to you, you know, or your business or your family. And then I think you also want to make sure that you have documentation for every deduction that you take on your tax returns. So that seems to be the real key part. And when I've walked into audits for taxpayers, I've had no problems when I've had all the documentation. When the IRS sees that, they see that we have the documentation for everything. Typically that audit goes very quickly because they want to move on to the next person, and the next person may not be so fortunate with their record keeping.
In your experience, is there one mistake that people commonly make when they're dealing with the IRS, and something that they definitely should not do that will not help their case?
Well, I think there's a couple of mistakes that they do, but I think the first thing is that a lot of people will go in and try to fight the IRS on their own, and that's very difficult if you don't have an understanding either as to the tax laws themselves or to how the IRS operates. I think that's number one. But if you are going to go in and deal with the IRS, maybe it's a small issue, or maybe you do have the confidence or the records to back up your position. I think the major problem with a lot of folks is that they end up talking too much to the IRS. They give the IRS too much information, and by doing so, they may close the door on one issue, but by saying a few things, they may open up another issue that the IRS wasn't going to get into or maybe even didn't know about. So it gets real difficult into knowing how to reply to the IRS to give them the documents or maybe the testimony, the oral testimony that the IRS may be looking for if you don't do this for a living. And I think that's really the number one handicap that most taxpayers have when dealing with such a massive bureaucracy like the IRS.
So, the things on that, like for example, even this past year, I'm trying to pay off this home in Germany, but I'm very leery about any income and moving stuff around with foreign accounts. So if you do that, be very careful. If you exceed, say, like $10,000 in a foreign account, it would likely trigger an audit. Also, it's tough to have a foreign account anymore because the banks don't like you. There's so much reporting that needs to be done. I had a buddy who had a job in Switzerland, and they were flat. None of the banks would take them because the Americans were just too much trouble because the government reporting between the government. So it's kind of awkward right now, but things may change. We also talked about Mint, and I was seeing if there was a more current video, but this was actually fairly recent. Does anybody use Mint? Yeah, exactly. We'll play this video, and then we'll see if you guys have any comments, whether you've made any big upgrades between now and then.
All the investors said you'll never change human behavior, people are set in their ways with regards to finance. The truth is 90% of people who use Mint say they've changed their spending habits simply by seeing where their money is going. Once you see that you spend more on restaurants than you do on rent, or that you went to Starbucks literally 47 times last month, it changes behavior just to know that. 40% of our users say they actually dine out less and cook more at home because of Mint. The new feature that we're launching is called Financial Goals. And Financial Goals is a system for figuring out how to, in a step-by-step manner, either get out of debt, save for retirement, buy a home, save for your kids' college, buy a car, take a trip, or any custom goal that you want. So we will take buy a home as an example.
I believe this is the time to buy.
And what's great about this is Mint already knows quite a bit about you in terms of what your annual income might be. It pulls in the average 30-year fixed rate automatically, pulls in the average property tax and annual insurance rates. So really, you have very little to adjust. So you put in your income, and it says you can afford a home that costs about $800,000. It's going to be a $4,100 monthly payment. That's the aggressive assumption. Here's what it would be if it was more conservative. So it says if you're saving up 20% down, you need $131,000 for your down payment. So you click next, give it a title, Dream Home, and then you can set a date for when you want to achieve this. As you set a date, it adjusts what you need for your monthly contribution. That monthly contribution looks very large, so I'm going to say, you know what, this is a few years out. And I can say, okay, well, I can save up that much each month. You can upload a photo of your dream house if you'd like. And then it'll show you your progress, and it says, here's how much you've saved so far this month out of the $2,000 that you were supposed to save. And then for each goal, you've got a set of steps that you want to go through. So it says, here's your planned date, here's your projected date, if you keep saving at this rate, when you'll actually reach it, so you're slightly ahead of schedule. Determine what you can afford, understanding what percentage of your income should go towards a home, making sure that you've got your credit score in order. So it's a mixture of content and advice that we've got in there that helps you step by step achieve each goal.
So obviously, it's not going to save the money for you. You still got to do that. But if it's helpful and, kind of visualizing or communicating that, this is what we're doing. I don't know. Have they changed it much, or did you use the goals part?
I just have the app.
Yeah.
So it just kind of tracks. They got better at tracking. Sometimes they would get you have a charge to make the uncategorized. They didn't know where to put it, and you have to put it someplace. And that was kind of the thing. They got pretty good at saving everything everywhere now. So I have goal budgets for everything. And I send some emails. I go over my budget.
the good thing about those ones too is I used to have Microsoft Money and I had Quicken and some of these other ones. And Quicken like for home or whatever, and they weren't as good as this. And you had to buy the software. So this stuff's all online. I mean, you're not paying any subscription fee, are you? Yeah. So yeah, the stuff in the cloud is probably better than some of the other stuff. But again, it's like I will kill plants at home because I forget to water them now and then. I think the budgeting software would kind of be the same thing. Emails to prompt me to keep me in mind would probably be helpful if it's fairly automated, But anyway, you figure out what works for you and go with that. One last thing is another. This is a CNN calculator thing that really gets back to kind of a budgeting thing.
How sound are your personal finances? Are you paying more in mortgage debt and housing costs than you should, given your income? Do you have enough tucked away in savings to meet unexpected expenses or to carry you over if you're laid off from your job? And what about your investment portfolio? Is it as diversified as it should be, or are you overly concentrated in one asset class? Given how volatile both the economy and the financial markets have been in recent years, it's more important than ever to know where you stand financially and how you might fare in difficult as well as good economic times. There are a variety of ways you can get a fix on your financial health, including sitting down with a financial planner or other advisor. But as a starting point, consider giving yourself a financial checkup by revving up our How Healthy Are Your Finances tool, or, as I like to call it, our Do-It-Yourself Financial Stress Test. You begin your self-assessment by entering your age and annual income. You'll then be asked to plug in information about 7 key areas of your personal finances, including the amount you're paying in housing carrying costs, the size of your emergency savings fund, how much stock is in your investment portfolio, the amount of life insurance coverage you have, and how much you're saving each month for retirement. As you do this, you'll get immediate feedback showing how you're faring in each area compared with appropriate benchmarks. So, for example, if you earn $50,000 a year, and you have debt payments from mortgages, credit cards, and other loans of $2,000, you'll get a warning telling you that your total payments generally shouldn't exceed 36% of gross income. When you complete all 7 parts of the test, which shouldn't take more than a few minutes, you'll get an overall grade that ranges from A+ to F. If you aced every single section of the test, good for you. You're on the road to a secure financial future. Although you'll probably want to go through this exercise again periodically to make sure you remain on track. But if you came in with less than a top grade, which I suspect will be the case for many of us, the idea is to look for ways to start improving in the areas where you fell short. So if our test tells you you're carrying too much debt, you might go to our debt reduction planner tool to see how you can reduce the burden, or you might check out the debt management section of bankrate.com for tips on how to consolidate loans and find credit cards and loans with lower interest rates. Similarly, if your investment portfolio is skewed too heavily towards stocks or bonds, you can go to our asset allocator tool for advice on how to create a stocks-bonds mix that makes sense given your financial goals and your tolerance for risk. And if you've fallen behind saving for retirement, you can go to our What You Need to Save calculator, where you get a quick estimate of how much you ought to be putting away each year, given your age and the amount of money you already have saved. If nothing else, the past few years of setbacks in the economy and the chaos in the financial markets have taught us the importance of being prepared. So give yourself a financial checkup, and if you find yourself lacking in any areas, start making improvements. You'll not only be much better prepared to weather future crises, you'll also be in a better position to prosper when the economy thrives.
So again, some of these guys are structured stated in terms of some of the programs, some of the apps, and some of these things that are kind of one-size-fits-all, especially like housing costs. If you're living someplace like San Francisco, you are going to be paying a fortune extra housing. That's just the nature of the thing. That's what you're... Sorry, that's what we're doing. So when they come up with something that's based on national averages, it may not be necessarily appropriate for the best. But anyway, any questions on any of those 3 videos? Let's take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll talk more about tax stuff. And then towards the end, I want to also maybe talk a little bit about the project and stuff, just to kind of get you kind of pointed in the right direction on that.